Without further ado, let's begin our discussion of a 15-year-old cold case in 1988. Actor Youssef Abdullahi, Rani Martin Tucker, and Rashid Omar. A bizarre twist that has finally been solved. Lynette White, a stunning woman from Cardiff, Wales, had dropped out of school and had been working as a prostitute since she was 14 in order to make ends meet. Before she was discovered dead, Lynette had no desire to become a sex worker. When contacted by Tim Rogers, a BBC Wales reporter who was looking into juvenile prostitution, Lynette described how she had been drugged and transported to Bristol by a group of men and then forced into prostitution. After managing to return to Cardiff, Lynette was still unable to escape prostitution by 1988. Friends characterized Lynette, who was now 20 years old and working the streets as a prostitute, as being popular and attractive. Cardiff's top prostitute was Lynette. She worked every day, even Christmas, earning £100 every night. This work supported her addiction, not her life. Stephen Miller's nightly cocaine addiction stole £60 to £90 from Lynette, his only income. Miller last saw Lynette February 9, 1988. Miller and Lynette shared a Dorset Street Cardiff flat. Miller drove her to Riverside every day and met her at the North Star Club in the evening to collect her pay. Lynette rarely didn't talk to Miller or her friends before her death. She would also testify. Lynette's friends provided her a flat to take customers for sex on February 14, 1988. Leanne went to use the flat that evening but found it locked, which was unusual. Lynette had vanished. Leanne reported Lynette's disappearance to Buttertown police. Leanne drove back to her James Street residence with 3 police officers expecting to serve Lynette with an arrest warrant and haul her in. The policemen pushed through the entry and found Lynette in her own blood. The autopsy of a missing witness revealed who murdered Lynette White. Lynette's face, chest, stomach, wrists, breasts, arms, and inner thighs had 50 knife cuts. Lynette's throat was sliced from ear to ear despite being repeatedly stabbed. The pathologist determined Lynette was murdered between 1:45 and 4 a.m. on February 14th. Lynette's body was found at the foot of the bed in the window, covered in blood, with zoospermic semen that contained no sperm in her vagina, on distinct blood types, her own blood, and a B-type blood that wasn't hers. As Lynette's death became public, police began investigating. Witnesses reported seeing a disturbed, bloody man on James Street when Lynette's body was found. The investigation focused on a suspicious Caucasian male in his mid-30s, between 5 and 10 feet tall. A man who closely matched the suspect's description was soon held, but after presenting an alibi, he was released. Police investigated Miller Lynette's boyfriend because the companion of a murder victim is usually the first suspect. Miller was investigated, but freed since his blood type didn't match Lynette's. Miller and his mother were investigated, but eliminated since her blood did not match Lynette's B blood type. The Francine Cordell case and the second case where Lynette was persuaded to testify are unknown. Mr. X had blood type AB, so the police tested his DNA. Mr. X was disqualified from the investigation, leaving the police with only door-to-door statements. Gromit, who lived above Lynette's flat, and his friend Atkins give statements that accused each other. But the investigators didn't believe them because the affidavits contained 4 distinct narratives. Ronnie Williams, another informant, implicated Youssef Abdullahi, his common-law brother. Williams claimed Abdullahi knew the culprit before accusing him of murder. The cops rejected the statement again since they knew the men hated one another. Leanne Vilde, who reported Lynette's absence on the day of her death, was also suspected and probed. But she became too stressed and named Miller and Abdullahi as the secretariat while intoxicated. 8 months into the probe, Cardiff Yacht Club Secretariat Violet Perriam spoke forward. She claimed that on February 14th at around 1:30 a.m., while driving home from the club, she saw 4 ecstatic black males outside the structure where Lynette was killed. She then recognized 2 of them as John Acte and Raz Midlimar. Perriam's testimony would change the course of the case. Mildly mentally ill when Lynette was murdered, John's cousin Tony Paris and John braced outside of 7 James Street. This was exactly what the authorities needed because her account supported the prosecution's statement and further implicated Abdullahi. John Miller and the others, who were Gromack and Atkins, provided fresh statements on the same day as Sella. They claimed to have seen a group of men, including Rani and Abdullahi Sailor. Sella later provided a new statement in December 1988, claiming to have heard a scream coming from Lynette's apartment and rushed there with Vilde. Coincidentally, on the same day, Vilde also informed the police that she had gone to the apartment after hearing Lynn. She also acknowledged that she had to sever Lynn's wrist in order to secure her cooperation and silence. After 307 denials, Miller finally admitted to killing Lynette. He also named the other men, which led to the arrest of all the persons thought to have been involved in the murder on Deonler. They arrested actor Youssef Abdullahi, Rani Martin Tucker, and Rashid Omar on December 9, 1988. John Acday and Tony Paris were also detained for nearly a year before their trial at Swansea Crown Court on October 5, 1989. After 197 days and 2 years in detention, Ronnie and John Acday were found not guilty of the murder, while Tony Paris, Stephen Miller, and Youssef Abdullahi were found guilty and each received a life sentence. Since then, they have come to be known as the Cardiff Four. If the Cardiff Three didn't commit the crime, it means the real criminal was still at large. This brings us to yet another question. Who really murdered Lynette? Lord Taylor stated, after the Court of Appeals had heard Miller's interrogation, that the police had bullied Miller during the interview. Therefore, the truthfulness of Miller's admission was irrelevant. The Cardiff Three was free at last because Lord Taylor had declared their convictions unsafe and unsatisfactory. As the case was reopened 8 years later, Professor Dave Barkley and Chief Superintendent Kevin O'Neill were given the assignment. This time, the investigation brought the officers back to the crime scene, even though it had been 12 years since the incident occurred. When the crime was committed in 1988, the police removed a great deal of the wallpaper in the apartment to be stored as evidence. Upon searching through the all wallpaper evidence, they discovered that the only missing piece of wallpaper was the one that contained the large drop of blood. The forensic scientists kept searching for the wallpaper. On February 26, 2003, officers found Jeffrey Gafford's semi-detached house in Hanhurin, 15 miles west of Cardiff, empty. They visited Jeffrey's Cardiff City Centre security guard office the next day. "Well, I assumed you had people for that," Jeffrey said after the cops explained their visit. He gave a mouth swab when asked. Chief Superintendent O'Neill had Jeffrey under observation while he prepared the interview. On February 28, 2003, Jeffrey did something weird. O'Neill planned to watch him for a week. Jeffrey had 62 paracetamols when the police arrived. He bought 3 paracetamol packs from a garage. "Just for the record, I did kill Lynette White," Jeffrey said despite his claims. "After 15 years of waiting, I want to die." Jeffrey told a healthcare worker that he was being watched for a 15-year-old murder. After a few days, Jeffrey took an antidote and recovered on July 4, 2003. Jeffrey confessed to killing Lynette White, and Justice Royce sentenced him to life with a minimum of 12 years and 8 months. Jeffrey's attorneys alleged he wanted his money back after changing his mind in February 2007 and murdered Lynette for the £30 for the sex. By December 2008, Atkins, Sala, Vilde, and Gromek faced perjury charges. In March 2009, it was announced that there was enough evidence to indict the initial police officers for conspiracy to distort justice. In 2011, the trial failed owing to missing evidence. And in 2015, Atkins was exempt because he was intimidated, threatened, abused, and persuaded to admit to false accounts provided to him. Seldebild and Gromek received an 18-month sentence. 5 exonerated men received compensation. Miller received £571,000. Tony Paris earned £250,000, and John Acday £300,000. Ron Acday died in 2007 after struggling to cope with all that had transpired. This was the end of the Lynette White murder case. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications before leaving. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.